Forget gurus. Forget anyone claiming to be an online business expert without going through the challenges of entrepreneurship themselves. The Real Money, Real Business podcast is here to prove the best insights in online business comes from your fellow online business builders. We dig into stories of entrepreneurs selling their business on the Empire Flippers marketplace so that you can learn how they made their business profitable, how they overcame obstacles, and what lessons they learned in their online journey. If you want to take your business and your knowledge to the next level, you've come to the right podcast. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Real Money, Real Business podcast. We record these interviews so potential buyers have more information about the seller and the business to help them make a buying decision. Today, we'll be talking about a display advertising business for sale, and I have the seller with me today. So welcome to the show, Jermaine, and how are you doing?
I'm good, Vinny. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on. Really excited to talk about your business. Just before we get stuck in, let me give a very brief summary of your business for our listeners. So, today's listing is a display advertising, digital product and Amazon Associates business created in July 2018 in the health and fitness and medical niches. The average monthly revenue for the business is $3,921 and it makes an average of $3,608 per month in net profit. The assets included in the sale are a domain and all of the site's contents and files, an email list with 503 subscribers hosted on ConvertKit, social media accounts, and SOPs. You can head over to empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing 53535 to learn more about the business. And if you want to start your due diligence, you can unlock the listing if you're interested in purchasing this asset. Jermaine, that's a very high-level overview of your business, but let's find out about yourself. Can you share a bit about your background in building or running online businesses? Is this your first gig, or have you been in the circle for a while?
Well, I've been in the circle sort of indirectly. So I worked for quite a while, for over a decade in the tech industry. And so I had my hands in technology and product marketing and things of that nature for a while. And basically, when I decided to actually move over to doing this blog, it was really just me deciding to create my own thing. I had also had quite a bit of experience as a freelance writer for other people in the past. So I figured that I could basically take my writing skills and my own personal interests, put them together and create this blog that we have now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So it sounds like you building up experience in the background while you were also running, on top of your day job in the tech industry. Can you share with me, Jermaine, why did you choose to create a business in these particular niches? I think you mentioned there's a bit of personal interest mixed in as well.
Yeah, correct. So by the time I started this, actually, just to go back to our previous question, by the time I started this, I was already left the tech industry. I had always had more of a curiosity about health. Pretty much the entire time I was in tech. So I had gotten different trainings and certifications that were much more health and wellness focused. And so finally it was just time to basically take the plunge. And that really was my driving force, was just to finally do something that I had personal interest in, that I actually enjoyed, and that I knew could also help transform people's lives, because we are talking about, like you said, the health and medical content here. So that was really the driving force for me. It was just to do something that was more fun.
That's great. I'm really glad that you managed to find something that you were really passionate about, something that was close to your heart, make an impact in people's lives, and at the same time you get paid for it as well. So that's great stuff. I wanted to ask you, how does the business make money? Because it's monetized in a few different ways. Yeah,
it is. So the main source of revenue is through ads. So display ads, that's the main source. And then after that, there's a digital product. So I had multiple digital products throughout the last few years, and I've been able to essentially put that into one sort of signature product. And that's what I currently offer. And then after that, there is a smaller percentage of the revenue that comes from AdSense. So there's a YouTube channel that goes along with this. There is a little bit also that comes from Amazon affiliate. So that is, and then there's a few other independent non-Amazon affiliate programs as well. And those together make up a smaller portion of the revenue. So I would say primarily ads, digital products, that is the chunk of monetization.
Yeah, makes sense. For people who are listening who are interested in getting into this space, I guess similar to where you were just before you started up this business, why would you say that these particular monetizations are great for people just getting started?
I think the ads in particular just make sense because you have to create content anyways. And it doesn't really matter if you have a blog or even if you were doing something that was exclusively YouTube based, but you have to create content anyways, just as basically your business card, your marketing tool. So if you're going to create that content, if you have enough eyes coming to look at it, from my perspective, you might as well put ads on the site. That way you get paid just for people browsing through your website. And even if they don't buy a product, you still made some money and got some income out of the time that you spent creating that content. So that's my perspective as far as the ads. As far as the digital products, what I think is very good there is just that it's about as passive as you can get. I mean, nothing's truly passive, but once you create it one time, once you've nailed it down. So I went through a phase of trying out different things and then, like I said, eventually condensing them into one thing. But once you've kind of figured out what works, you have that packaged and there's nothing to ship out or mail to anybody. They can download it and you can just automate the entire process and they get everything that they need. So again, from that perspective, it's fairly low maintenance. You might update digital products once in a while if there's a need to in terms of maybe changes or new information, but for the most part, it's locked down and it's done.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, I like what you're saying as well about how, no business is truly hands off. There's always going to be some degree of, involvement, but yeah, the digital product side of this, is relatively passive because like you say, once it's out there and it's shipped, then it runs by itself, which is great stuff. You've grown the business to a really good size, but our listeners will be wondering, why are you selling the business right now instead of staying with it or growing it?
Yeah, so at this point, this was my first venture, and now it's kind of opened my eyes to a lot more possibilities. So I've a lot more other things that I now want to do from a business or entrepreneurial perspective. And I know that trying to shift to those things means I won't be able to dedicate the time to do this, and especially because it is in this health and wellness space, I do think that it needs the attention of somebody, like as far as creating content or ongoing creation of content, it needs enough attention. And I know that now I would not have or the focus to do it because I am working on other business ventures. And so I feel that it's a good time to pass it off to somebody who might want to carry it forward.
For sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I think a lot of people in your position often find themselves exploring other projects, which is completely natural. And as we keep going with this interview, we'll find out a bit more about your experience in building this business so that, the right buyer can take it and take the baton off your hands and continue running with it and growing it. So I suppose on that note, as you were growing this business, did you find anything that you learned that you would apply to future sites of businesses? Just any sort of tactics or strategies that just really worked for you?
I think the biggest thing that I found was basically doing what some people call original research. And what that means is the content that I have, because the topics that I cover are covered to some degree by lots of other people, but it's the approach that I took, which was to not just regurgitate and repeat exactly what's already out there. My goal was to give my audience a new insight and also give them a sense of hope and also control when it came to their health. And the reason I was doing that was very purposeful because I understood already the messaging that was already out there from other people, and I knew that there was another perspective to this. So I spent a lot more time doing research in terms of looking even at like medical papers and things like that, and then basically translating that information into easy to understand, digestible language for my audience so that they knew that there was a whole other set of possibilities that were out there, but that just were not talked about as much. And to me, that is what has ultimately helped me the most, was to just not repeat what is already on other websites, but to just go find whole new, fresh information the feedback that I've gotten from people, whether it's through the blog or through my YouTube channel, has always talked mostly about how they learn something new if they read my content, or they learn something new when they watch my video. And that's what has helped me. That's what has driven the sales of the digital product that goes along with it. And that's what has kept the traffic and everything else working, was, I think, just that aspect. So that to me is something that I will always carry forward, is to just say, really dive deep and look at things, a little bit more critically, look at it more holistically. And that is just part of my training when it comes to health, but to really take a 360 view and then find a way to bring all the pieces together and give that information to the audience. Because like I said, my goal is to ultimately empower the audience and give them a greater sense of control and hope, and as opposed to desperation.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you were first starting out, was there any software or tools that you found really helped you as you were just growing the business?
Honestly, well, I will say not necessarily in terms of tools, but I think one platform, I will say in terms of platforms, was Pinterest. So I did all the usual things. I tried all, I did Facebook and Pinterest, and I think for a hot minute I tried Twitter, and Pinterest was the one that definitely played a big role in growing the business. And that's just because it has a visual element to it that just allowed me to play with design elements. I'm not a designer, but I have worked with enough designers to have a general understanding of what might be visually appealing to people. So being able to bring the little bit of knowledge that I had in that space and apply that to basically catching the Pinterest user's eye to then drive traffic, I think that was a big help for me. So I would say Pinterest was a big one. And then the other tools that I use at this point, ConvertKit is what I use for my email marketing, and I really like it just because it's simple. It's not very complicated. I had tried other software prior to that, and it wasn't as seamless to me. So that's one that's been a big help for sure, yeah.
That makes sense. You were saying about the other tool not being so seamless for you. I guess on that note, was there anything that you found that you tried that just didn't really give you the ROI that you were looking for?
Yeah, so when I first started, I had a vision that I was going to use the website to do more one-on-one work. And so I started off in the very early days trying to do webinars and trying to pitch products during the webinars, and that didn't go so well. I attempted to run, Facebook ads, again, sometimes to those webinars, or sometimes to use Instagram lives to direct. I was very focused on the whole, you've got to do a webinar, you have to pitch a product, and that whole funnel. And for me, it just didn't work out. But part of it also was the fact that I did realize that in order to have major success with Facebook ads, I also needed a bigger budget, which at the time I did not have. So once I came to that understanding, I really just put that whole approach to the side and just focused on creating content. And once I did that, then everything took off.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. What advice would you give to our listeners that you wish you knew when you first started?
I think the biggest thing would be to basically find your own secret sauce or your own recipe. So what I mean is, at the beginning, again, a lot of the tactics I follow, whether it had to do with webinars or Facebook ads and different things, a lot of that was coming from me listening to other so-called experts or gurus who I think had used those tactics for themselves. But again, it's like I wasn't taking into consideration what works for me in terms of my personality and my strengths, because some of those tactics work well, but you also need to work with your strengths. So one thing I've learned is that go with your strength for sure. It makes things easier because there's already a whole lot of other things you have to learn anyways. So if on top of that, you're trying to work more with your weakness, then it just feels like drudgery, right? It's just so slow and it drags on. So to me, that would be the biggest thing, is to work with your strengths or highlight your strengths, and I forget what I said earlier, but to basically find your own recipe. So for me, I realized that it didn't matter how many experts said you had to do Instagram or how many experts said you had to do the other thing. I still had to come up with my own unique blend. And once I allowed myself to go with that and to listen to that intuition, then again, things just flowed better.
Yeah, it makes sense what you're saying about the secret sauce, finding your own recipe for success. I think it probably combines well with your way of working as well, like you were describing before. The focus on not trying to keep pace and churn out similar content to what everybody else is saying, but bearing in mind what they did say, create your own sort of spin on things and just trying to add value to the audience. So it makes sense, everything that you're saying there. I just want to switch over to the marketing side of things now. Majority of the traffic, is it mainly organic search or is there any paid advertising involved?
So most of the traffic is social, mostly Pinterest, and then there's organic and direct. So there are no paid ads, no paid traffic at this time. No paid traffic.
Right, so the majority of the traffic is actually Pinterest. Can you share a bit more about what that looks like then in terms of maintaining from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, because my account is fairly old and sort of grandfathered in, there's not a whole lot of maintenance that I'm having to do. So I write a new content about once a month. I might write a new article. And so when I create any new content, I create a new pin for that. And then I add it to the appropriate board on Pinterest. And that's it. And then I'll repeat the same thing the following month if I write a new article. Now, in between, I am on Pinterest pretty much every day for maybe about 5 minutes. I'll go and just check my stats, check in on comments because people can leave comments. I might check to see if there's anything relevant there. And if I feel the need to repin content from somebody else that I come across, I'll do that. And that's it. But that's literally like 5 minutes of my time on Pinterest. So I really don't have to do a whole lot of maintenance right now, which is the good thing. Now, whoever takes on the business, obviously, the more content they create, then the more pins they'd be creating on Pinterest. For where I'm at, I'm really happy with where I've gotten it, and I've been able to do this pace that I just shared with you, since last year and do it comfortably and not have it be something that really takes up a lot of my time in any way.
Yeah, I think definitely makes sense. The age of the account and how frequently you have been posting so far on Pinterest probably makes the account quite strong. And obviously you've developed a big following on there, so that's a huge asset. On a day-to-day basis, because you mentioned that making the pins and stuff, that doesn't really take too much time. On a day-to-day basis or even a weekly basis, can you describe what's the type of work you do to maintain the business?
Sure. So I would say on a weekly basis, if it's I'll pick a week where I decide, okay, I'm going to write a new article. In that week, my own personal process usually involves going through Google and using that as to help me sort of generate ideas for like the subtopics or subheadings that we're using in the article. I'll try to find research papers around the topic for that article if I can find them. Sometimes I can't, but usually there's something out there. So I'll gather all of that information, run through the paper real quick and see if there's anything relevant or helpful in there, and then just get to writing the article. So creating the content itself, that whole process could be about 4 hours, anyway, up to 8 hours. It really depends on the content because some are quite short and some are longer. But adding in the research time and me sort of thinking over the ideas, so that could be anywhere from a 4 to 8 hour process for that week. The article's done, and then creating the pin. That could be, for me, depends again. Sometimes I have to go research whole new images. Sometimes I can just reuse a template. But I would say about half an hour of work to create that pin and share it to Pinterest, and then that's done. So that's for a week where I'm creating content. All the other weeks, it's pretty much what I said before, which is just going on Pinterest for about 5 minutes every day and going through my stats and maybe repinning 1 or 2 pieces of content from other content creators. And then there's the YouTube side. The YouTube side, that is something that I do just as needed, so I don't have a fixed schedule for that. And the reason also being because YouTube is not a huge driver of traffic, so since I've come to understand that, I also don't do a lot of content, and also because, again, I don't like repeating or regurgitating what's already out there. So if I don't really have an original idea for a video, if I don't have a really new perspective to share, I am not going to do content. And that means I can go months without doing content, but that is the choice that I make. And so far it's worked for my audience. Like, they'd rather have me say less and say something relevant than just bombarding them all the time with sort of noisy content.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. I think when you pump out too much, I think kind of diminishing returns when it's not particularly valuable, and sort of almost feel like it's just there for the sake of being top of mind. So that makes sense. So yeah, if you did stay with the business, Jermaine, what are some of the ways that you would try to expand it?
So there's a few things. The first thing would just be updating some of the older content, because I do have some real old content from early days that I think could do with some SEO sprucing up. So that would be something that I would want to do first, and that would help to hopefully increase organic traffic. And then on the Pinterest side, also creating what Pinterest calls fresh pins for old content. So there is a need also on Pinterest to say, because in the old days, you could really just repin the same image, the same visual, let's say, the same graphic for existing content. But these days, they do prefer that if you're going to do multiple graphics for the same piece of content, that it be visually different enough. So there's room also to just go through even just the blog post that I wrote last year, because many of them I pinned one time. So going through just everything from last year and creating new pins, because every time you put out new content, there's new eyes that see it and more traffic that comes through. So that would help just from a pure traffic perspective. And then on the digital products, I do think that there is a lot of opportunity to create some ebooks. So here, from the perspective of basically going through the blog and just reusing the content that is already on the blog to create different ebooks on different topics, because the blog covers a good number of different major or high-level topics that could have their own ebooks. So just reusing and recycling that blog content and putting it into something nice and easy to read through in the ebook format, I think would be really, really beneficial. And then potentially even running ads also, that might be something to consider, is running ads to the digital product, because the product, has some testimonials on it and has some validation behind it at this point. So running ads to it definitely might be helpful. And lastly, I would also say that it would be a good idea to even update the copy on the sales page. So all the content on there is written by me, is my words. I'm happy with the conversions, but I do think that it could convert even more. But I think that would require hiring a writer who has some understanding, especially just writing for this type of audience in the health niche, and maybe kicking up the copy, kicking it up several levels. That could potentially help also to increase conversions and ultimately boost the revenue for the site. So the other opportunity that I see on the blog is actually expanding on basically the content silos or the major topics, because I mentioned before, there's lots of different topics that are covered. And in fact, the one issue that I faced was that I covered too many topics, and to some degree, I couldn't dive deep into enough of them. So I think that being able to take each of those topics and really expanding on them and creating dozens and dozens more articles on each of those topics or silos, that will really help from an SEO perspective to really get more eyeballs on the site and get more traffic onto the site. So I think that is definitely something that to me has always been, is something that in looking back in retrospect, I realized that I just covered a ton of topics and didn't really zoom in on enough of them. So there's plenty of room to just create more content for those different topics.
Yeah, that's great. There's definitely lots of different opportunities there, for sure. I just want to ask you, though, for a buyer who's interested in stepping in and acquiring this site, what would you say are some of the biggest risks with this business that a buyer should be aware of?
Well, I would say the biggest risk would come from any traffic changes, or rather any algorithm changes. So as I mentioned before, since the traffic is coming primarily from Pinterest, it is possible that they would make some algorithm changes that could affect the traffic. And of course, that goes with any source of traffic. There's algorithm changes that could impact it. So I would say that would be the most important thing to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's definitely worth bearing in mind. But last few questions from me then. How much support are you offering buyers?
So I go in with the standard of 30 days and 2 calls. But of course, if there's a need to do more, I'm more than happy to do more, because I want to make sure that the transition is as smooth as possible for the buyer. So if there's a need for more, I'm happy to do more.
That's great to hear. Are you willing to commit to a non-compete?
Yes.
Okay. And are you open to negotiating something like an earn-out, like seller financing?
So to be honest, I am looking for an all-cash payment, but of course I understand that each buyer's needs might be different. So, I'm happy to entertain it depending on the specifics of the buyer's request or the buyer's offer, basically.
That's great to hear. Last question from me then, Jermaine. Put yourself in the shoes of a buyer. Why would you say that this is a business worth buying?
I would say it's worth buying primarily because, again, the monetization through ads, I think, is to some degree less stressful, and there's a fair amount of good content that's already on the site. The traffic is established and pretty steady when it comes to that aspect of things. So going in, at least the buyer can have some breathing room where they can take their time to basically build things up and not have to scramble, basically, to build up more traffic immediately because it's sitting at a pretty good place. And then the other thing I would say is that it's a good business because the audience that is targeted for this is one that is really thirsty for good information. And it's an audience that is very much neglected to some when it comes to content and, original content. So this is an audience that for sure, as long as you give them something that they know is well researched and is not just opinion based, right? But where they know that, okay, this is somebody who truly cares and has put the time to give good information, like that audience is very loyal. And they're out there and they're, like I said, they're really neglected. So even though the topic I cover is talked about a lot, but it's not talked about a lot in the way that I approached it. And so for the buyer, that allows them to be in a sort of blue ocean in terms of being one of the few people that is really helping that audience to improve their health in that very specific way.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Is there anything you'd like to share that you think I might have missed?
No, I don't think there's anything else.
No worries. Well, Jermaine, it's been a pleasure having you on the interview today. And, I hope that the right buyer who's listening to this podcast, is interested in acquiring your business in the not too distant future.
Hope so too. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. To learn more and see if this listing has already been sold, head over to empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing number 53535. If you're watching this on YouTube, click the link in the description to go straight to the listing. And once you've unlocked the listing, you'll be given everything you need to know about the business. So until next time, enjoy your digital journey.